Yo, what's going on YouTube? SoFlo Sneakers here, and today I'm bringing you a video all about proxies. So real quick, before we hop into that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for all the support you've been showing me. It's been a crazy month, honestly. I have over 120 subscribers, thousands of views on a couple videos, and it's unbelievable. So this week I haven't been pushing out any videos because I've been working super hard on getting my setup upgraded. So I got a totally new computer, I got a new camera, new lights, new everything. It's all on the way. So hopefully this will be the last video on the Mac, and in the future it'll be a lot better quality, picture, everything like that. So thank you guys so much again for the support, and let's get into the video. So proxies might be a little hard to understand at first, but I promise by the end of this video you'll have a good understanding of how they work, why we use them, and the different types of proxies that there are. So I pulled up this little visual here just to give you guys a clearer picture of kind of what's going on when we're using proxies. So this is us right here, and we are on our home network, and we are also on our home IP address. So what an IP address is it's basically just like a virtual address. So your house has an address, a restaurant has an address, your school has an address, whatever it may be, it all has an address. So an IP address is basically just a virtual address for computer networks. So when you're running onto a website, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see your IP address. So the easiest way to think about what a proxy does is it's basically just a middleman between your computer and your network and the website that you're trying to run on. So for this example, let's just say that we're using Supreme. So it says Google, we'll just change that to Supreme. So a proxy is basically the middleman between our computer network and our computer and Supreme's website. So it says right here, you tell the proxy that you want to go to supreme.com. So then you're going to be over here now, and then the proxy is what's actually going to be sending the request to supreme.com. And as you can notice here, the IP address of the proxy is different. So since the proxy is actually what's sending the request to supreme.com, this IP address of the proxy is what's going to show up on Supreme's website. So typically you can pick the location of where you want your proxies to be located. So since we're doing Supreme for this example, Supreme's server is located in Virginia, so the proxies that we pick are also going to want to be located in Virginia. So let's just say that this proxy here, 2.2.2.2, is located in Virginia. So the proxy server, which has this IP address in Virginia, is going to be what's actually sending the request to supreme.com. So Supreme will receive the request from the proxy with this IP address, which is typically going to be located in Northern Virginia if we're running for Supreme. So if we weren't using a proxy, and let's just say we are running 20 tasks, which is basically just like web browsers on our bot, so we are running 20 tasks onto the Supreme website, and let's just say that we're going for a box logo. So since Supreme sees the IP address that we're running on, let's just say that we weren't using proxies, and we are running 20 tasks on our home IP address, which is 1.1.1.1. So Supreme is going to see 20 requests onto their website, all coming from the same IP address, all going for the same product. And so what that's going to tell them is that you're most likely using a bot, and what they're going to do is most likely just soft ban you, which is basically just like a temporary ban, and you won't be able to get whatever release you're going for. So in our case, you won't be able to get the box logo that you want. It's also possible that they could just ban your home IP network, so you won't be able to use the site. So an easy way to fix this is that if you're running more than 2 to 3 tasks or 2 to 3 web browsers on your bot, you want to be using proxies 100%. So as you can see, proxies are super important when you want to be running a lot of tasks and you want to be getting a decent amount of product. Proxies are an absolute must. So another thing about proxies that I didn't mention before is that although they are located in the same region, like I said before that this 2.2.2 is located in Northern Virginia because we're going for Supreme, they're all located in Northern Virginia, but they're all not in the exact same area, and all the IPs are going to be just a little bit different. So what this does is it basically just makes it look like 20 random people in the Northern Virginia area are trying to run onto the Supreme website and trying to get the box logo or whatever you might be running on. Versus if we are running on our home IP address, Supreme would see 20 requests from the same IP address running from the same location trying to get the same product. So we would definitely get banned that way, and that is why we use proxies. So I pulled up my proxy list in SplashForce just so you guys can get an idea of what they look like once they're in the bot. So they typically have an IP, a port, a username, and a password. So the first thing I want to mention is that when you're running proxies on your bot, you typically want to have a 1-to-1 proxy to task ratio. So over here, I have 24 tasks for Yeezy Supply, so that typically means that I would want to have 24 proxies in my list. So just a quick little tip is that I typically run a 2-to-1 proxy to task ratio just so I have extras in my list just in case some of my proxies are banned. So there's two main types of proxies that people run. The first is called residential and the second is called data center. So the two main differences between residential proxies and data center proxies are their speed and their chances of getting banned. So typically residential proxies are definitely going to be slower than data center proxies. Data center proxies are known for their speed and how fast they get onto the website. On the other hand, residential proxies have a very low chance of being banned versus data center that have a very high chance of being banned. So residentials are slower and have a low chance of being banned, and data centers are faster and have a higher chance of being banned. So another main difference between residential and data center proxies that I'm also going to talk about a little later in the video is their data usage. So typically, residential proxies have data plans that expire after you use the proxies a certain amount of times. With data center, you can typically use the proxies an unlimited amount of times within a certain time frame. So if I buy 1 gigabyte of residential proxies, I can use those proxies up until it uses 1 gigabyte of data. But if I buy data center proxies, I can use them as much as I want. Just when it hits a certain date, which is typically a month, then they will expire and I'll have to get new ones. If that was confusing at all, don't worry. I'm going to talk about it later in the video so you guys can get a clearer understanding of what I mean by that. So for websites with a splash release like Yeezy Supply and Adidas, I typically use residential proxies because speed isn't very important. So a splash release is basically everyone's onto the website and you're all in a waiting room, and then by chance you get picked to purchase the shoe. In this case, speed is not very important. So that's why we use residential proxies, just to make sure that they are not banned at the time of the checkout. So Supreme is first come first serve, and the sellout times are usually under 10 seconds. So in this case, speed is absolutely key. We need our proxies to be as fast as possible, and so typically we're going to run data centers for Supreme. Unfortunately, we have to make this trade-off of giving up the low chance of being banned with residential proxies for the speed of the data center proxies. So since the sneaker botting market is always changing, it's important that you know which type of proxy you should be using for each release. So how you're going to figure this out is you're going to join the Discord of whatever proxy provider you're using. So I'm going to leave a huge list in the description of a bunch of different proxy providers on Twitter. Pretty much every provider is going to have a Discord, and they also usually have a support team that'll be able to help you out and answer some questions that you might have. So right here, I am in Kai Cooked Proxies Discord. I use these guys sometimes for residential, sometimes for data center, but I always like to mix my proxies up, and I always like to experiment and really see which proxies are going to work the best for me. So I always am trying out new providers, seeing which ones work, which ones don't, which ones I have luck with, which ones I don't, anything along those lines. So it's always good to keep testing out new proxy providers and seeing which ones work the best for you. So during a typical drop, I'm typically running anywhere from 2 to 3 different proxy providers, all mixed up in my proxy list. So it just really gives me a good chance of having proxies that aren't banned. So if we can look here in their Discord, they have proxy announcements, and this is basically where they tell you what proxies you should be using for which drops. So if we read some of this here, let's see. So release proxies are up for Supreme today. Use a mix of release and everyday Supreme for residentials. DC proxies are also working and should do well today. So they're recommending that you could use residentials for Supreme. I personally don't use residentials for Supreme, but it's always good to experiment and try new things, maybe throw a few in your list just to see what works best for you, because everyone is going to have different results. So it's really just a matter of finding out which proxies that your provider recommends that you use for a drop and experimenting with them and maybe switching up providers within the drop. Anything along those lines, just really finding out what proxies work best for you. But like I said, I'm going to leave a huge list in the description so you'll be able to compare a bunch of different providers and you'll be able to see their prices, their guarantees, like if they guarantee that their proxies are unbanned on a certain site. So you'll be able to pick which proxy provider is going to be the best fit for you. So let's head on into another one. So Red Dirt was actually the first proxies that I ever bought and the first proxies that I ever hit with. Their proxies really aren't too expensive and I always have some decent success with them. By the way, for this whole video, I'm not sponsored for anything. I'm just speaking from my personal experience and what's worked best for me. So another thing I haven't touched on too much is price. Price is definitely going to vary depending on what provider you choose. So we're on Red Dirt here. So typically you can get 1 gigabyte of residential data from Red Dirt from anywhere from $20 to $30. And I say 20 to 30 because sometimes they have discounts and sometimes they don't, stuff like that. And you can get data centers from Red Dirt for kind of around the same price. Data centers usually come in 10 packs, 20 packs, 25 packs, 50 packs. It's anywhere around that. But for example, I bought some Kai Cook DC proxies a few weeks ago and I paid $60 for 50 of them for Supreme, which is not that expensive, but when you're first starting off, it definitely could be expensive when at the same time come over to Red Dirt or a different provider and you can probably pick up 50 DCs for around $40. So me personally, I don't see a huge change in quality and what gets banned and what doesn't going from provider to provider. A lot of the times I have the same success with cheaper providers than more expensive providers, but what also happens is sometimes I have more success with the more expensive proxies than the cheaper proxies. So that's why I've kind of been stressing the whole video that it's really up to you to figure out which proxies and which providers are going to work the best for you. Another point that I wanted to touch on really fast before we wrap this video up is the data usage for residential proxies. I'm going to give you guys a super rough estimate of how much data you're typically going to be using up during a drop. Let's just say we bought 1 gigabyte of data for residential proxies, and let's just say on Red Dirt it costs us $30. So typically I run anywhere from 50 to 100 tasks, and I run these tasks from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm just talking about a typical Yeezy Supply drop here. So I run 50 to 100 tasks, and I run these tasks for 30 minutes to an hour. So after a typical drop like this, I use anywhere from 0.2 to 0.4 out of the whole gigabyte of data. So if I use 0.2, then 1 gigabyte of data could typically last me 5 drops, but if I'm using like 0.3, 0.4, then maybe it'll only be 2 or 3 drops. So like I said, that is a super rough estimate, but it is a way you can kind of think about it. So if you're only running 10 tasks for 30 minutes with your residential proxies, you're probably not going to put too much of a dent into the data usage. So you just have to keep that in mind. But most providers will allow you to track your data, so you'll be able to see how much you use after each drop, and then you can compare that between different providers and stuff like that. So another quick tip is some providers actually allow you to generate an unlimited amount of residential proxies, so you'll be able to filter out bad ones. So that's just something else to look for when you're buying your proxies, because that could actually be very useful. One last point before we wrap the video up that I want to talk about is that some proxy providers give you an unlimited amount of time for residential proxies. So let's just say you buy 2 gigabytes. It doesn't matter. There's no expiration date. It's just whenever you use up the 2 gigabytes of data, that's when your plan expires. But other providers will actually give you an expiration date on your residential proxies. So for example, you buy 2 gigabytes, but you also have 2 months to use up these 2 gigabytes or else it expires even if you don't use all of the data up. So that's just one more thing to consider when you're buying your proxies. I hope you guys learned a lot, and as always, if you learned something from this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more future videos, and please leave your questions and comments down in the comment section below, and I will make sure to answer every single one of them. So on that note, guys, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next one.